From San Francisco, California, this is What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the masonry left. I'm Eduardo Barca with Andy Lipson. Today we will discuss the very long headline issue that has been making the news. It's very rare to see a journalist that has been on some other country. We're talking about Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah.
And
Saudi Arabia.
To be in the national headlines for this long and for it to be about a journalist, well, self-imposed exiled here into the USA, but a journalist really that was from another country, Saudi Arabia. But what is just incredible is just that this news story has been persistent. So I had told you last week, as I had mentioned with the interview with Bruce, that we have to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So let's get into it. I can say some things. Do you want to say the premise?
Yeah, you just go ahead and start and your thoughts about it.
The 2nd of October, pretty much people know by now, Jamal Khashoggi entered the consulate at Turkey because he wanted to get his paperwork for his fiancée, who is Turkish. And they wanted, and she waited there all night, and he did not come out. And eventually, it was known that he, through Turkish investigations, which is actually very interesting because it's showing something about Turkey doing surveillance.
They had the whole place bugged.
These things are coming out. But he did not come out. And slowly, the Turkish press has been releasing bits here and there about what could have happened and what actually possibly happened, but without really saying where the sources are coming from, because that could compromise them for bugging the consulate. And it has been said that Jamal Khashoggi was pretty much slaughtered. Mm-hmm.
Tortured. They put into pieces. In fact, I heard he was drugged, and still the article that I had read, this is from the Turkish, again, they're dripping the information. Mm-hmm. He was actually dismembered while he was alive. Yeah, and tomorrow, Tuesday, by the time that this is uploaded, Erdogan will be giving. Is he like a prime minister?
President? But he is not. But he has consolidated so much power for himself. Yeah. So he's like really a dictator. But he will be releasing a more newsworthy report about the details, because this is just getting out of hand. And Saudi Arabia denied at first,
right? Not
even knowing anything about Khashoggi. It wasn't until finally they were like, okay, from the nudging of Trump saying something about rogue killers, all of a sudden they started adopting some of that form, but it kept going back and forth and then shifting on their positions, and then finally they came out. I remember I was using the toilet and I was listening to the news.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, all of a sudden I just heard, the news broke out that Khashoggi was told that they had indicted 18 of Saudi Arabian connected mafia that went rogue, that was separate from the Saudi king.
That's the cover story.
Yeah.
The most recent cover story.
And I just laughed out loud, like, what denial? First you said that he was not part, you had no knowledge, and then all of a sudden you say that he does. And then till now, just recently, they also had like a double come out of the consulate with the wrong shoes and the wrong wig and everything, but in Khashoggi's clothing with a camera. It's just been a whole dramatic scene, like a series I've been watching for this. It's so terrible. So anyhow, our thoughts on it. I wanted to give you a chance. Thank you.
Well, first, I don't believe for a second that the question is did the Prince Mohammed bin Salman, mm-hmm. Did he authorize this? Did he know about it? I don't believe for I'm convinced that he knew about this and authorized this. There's no way that 15 people underneath him are going to just go rogue on his watch. This guy only a year ago had basically imprisoned a bunch of his own cousins and family members under corruption, and has he kidnapped a Lebanese prime minister. Everyone knows this guy is not to be messed with. So there's no way that people underneath him were going to do something without getting direct authorization from him. So I don't believe for a second that this is the rogue story. I don't think the rogue story came from Trump. If you remember, the day after, almost 2 days after it started to be released that, after the Turkish government came out and said, no, we have information about this, we've got audio on this thing, that's when the U.S. and the Saudi Arabia started to scramble. And where did Pompeo go? Pompeo went directly to Saudi Arabia and met with the king, met with the prince, and was like meeting with these people. So they're putting their story together. So that's how this is all coming together. This is not. This is them trying to figure out how they're going to do damage control together. So it's been really remarkable to me. Saudi Arabia likes to keep a very low profile within the United States. People don't like. I mean, everyone talks about the U.S. aid to Israel and things like that. The U.S. gives immense aid to Saudi Arabia. The U.S. is pretty much responsible for their attack and the assault on Yemen, and it's U.S. weapons that have been killing children and blowing up buses and things like that. So this is a giant exposure. I don't think people are talking about Turkey as if they're in a tough situation here. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a tough situation at all. Oh. This situation for Turkey is like a gift from God, because Turkey has been trying to push Saudi Arabia into giving them money, and now what we have is a joint Turkey-Saudi Arabian investigation. It's not a joint Turkey-Saudi Arabian investigation. It's a joint negotiation on what are the terms of which we're going to release this information that are going to get Turkey the best deal in terms of Saudi Arabian investment, because Saudi Arabia still calls the tune around money because they are the major distributor of oil on the globe. Yeah. And so I just think there's 100% Bin Salman knew about this and authorized it, and he just overstepped it. I mean, the way I look at it is it's like the son of a rich person who just goes around and just beats the crap out of people and is like a bully and hurts homeless people and just gets away with it because he knows his dad is rich and going to protect him. This is Bin Salman in relationship to the United States. Mm-hmm. They know that the United States is going to cover them, has covered them for all sorts of their atrocities and all sorts. So this is just the latest atrocity. And the only thing I'll say that in addition to this is, people are kind of saying, well, that the prince has to answer to the king, King Salman. And that's not what's going on. The prince has to answer to the United States. And the people who are calling the tune here, the United States didn't ask him to do this. I know that for a fact. But the reason that Bin Salman is doing things like this is because of the United States. The United States authorizes these sorts of atrocities all the time. Extraordinary rendition has been going on since the 9/11, right? Which is basically the U.S. authorizing other countries to grab people and torture them, and then sometimes bring them to the United States and sometimes not. Obviously, Abu Ghraib, all sorts of torture centers the United States has authorized, Guantanamo Bay. So the real person calling the tune in Saudi Arabia is not the king, it's not the prince, it's the United States. But now the United States does not like what they have done here. And I actually think this guy, less a journalist, I think he's more the reason that the United States is so upset. I actually think he's connected to the intelligence agency within the United States. There's been I've read things about that, and I think he was helping get them information. Not a spy, but just part of the intelligence apparatus of the United States. So Bin Salman messed with one of theirs, and went and did a straight up gangster move on him, and it has really outraged the establishment. And I think it's put Trump in a real hot seat, because Republicans and Democrats across the board are saying he's got to do something, and Trump has been saying, "Oh, it's just a rogue operation. I believe Bin Salman," and then later he'll say, "Oh, I don't believe Bin Salman." So Trump has been doing this whole switch job. I think he's in a real tight spot because he has been counting on Saudi Arabia to be a major player in his foreign policy and what he's trying to do to reshape the Middle East. And now this is upending that. And I think the establishment, deep state, whatever you want, has now kind of got him in a position where he now has to go do what they're asking him to do, which is why he's now actually going after Russia more, and taking out recently did the whole thing with the intermediate nuclear missile treaty is gone. Mm-hmm. So I think all these things are connected. But we should talk more about this.
Yeah. Well, what is interesting for me is how this is continuing to persist just because Saudi Arabia has so many human rights violations in the past. This is not the very first. No. So I'm just trying to figure out what is it about, and I think that there is some connection because we have to remember Jamal Khashoggi was not this liberal progressive that everyone is making him out to be, right? If you look at his history, he worked for the press in Saudi Arabia as an editor-in-chief of one of the news outlets. I will post this link. I'm sorry, I don't remember at this moment. But he was an editor-in-chief, and he worked very closely with the monarchy. Yeah. And even he has history even amongst family ties with his either great grandfather or grandfather. One of his grandfathers, either great or ungreat, was the personal physician to the founder of Saudi Arabia. That's what I was trying to say earlier. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was the same king, but it's not. Okay. But the founder of Saudi Arabia, the person, this goes back a long time ago, so he has deep connections with the family.
And himself, he had been critical of opposition to the monarchy, and had actually been supporting abuses on the part of the monarchy against some of these, like he's saying, they had to crack down, and he was in support of cracking heads.
Yeah, and I think we forget this in all of this because we praise him for his dissent, and he did change eventually. I mean, he did recognize, and he did an interview with the BBC where I was watching where he had said, yes, that I was profoundly a strong Islamist, and then he invited a scholar, a Saudi Arabian scholar, on his news outlet when he was an editor-in-chief. I can link to all this. And that's when the Saudi monarchy was, what are you doing? You cannot do that. So they dismissed him from his post. And that is when he decided he had left. He decided to leave. And he self-imposed himself as exile and to leave. But he had these close ties, and I personally suspect that there is something, maybe he wasn't releasing or anything, but I suspect that he had a lot of information that was in close ties with the monarchy that maybe the monarchy didn't want to have revealed. Like you said, they have a low profile, and I honestly think that Mohammed bin Salman is quite thin-skinned. He does not like anything to be talked about Saudi Arabia, or especially now that he is mostly in charge of what is happening in Saudi Arabia, and has had many journalists, their Twitters be shut down, their Twitter accounts, has had activists imprisoned recently, and has even sought for ways to, in England, I know that there was some dissidents from Saudi Arabians that were beat up.
Right.
I had read, not in a consulate, but were beat up.
Right.
And on whose order?
Right.
Right.
And what has been the Western response? What has been the U.S. response to all those acts? Oh, come to Silicon Valley.
That's what I'm wondering. Why is this?
Come to Silicon Valley and hang out and get
right.
a contract.
You're talking about this, how we cater to the Saudi prince. Yes.
So they basically, during all those times when he was doing all that, he was basically being held up as a reformer. Oh, women can drive. You can let women drive.
But people don't talk about how he actually wanted to control the narrative for this, because he decided to tell all the activists, you cannot post because he didn't want to give credit to the activists, so you cannot post any praise or anything about this that I'm doing. They contacted directly the activists and said you cannot say anything about it.
The Saudi Arabian government.
The Saudi Arabian monarchy told activists you cannot comment. We will be releasing tomorrow that women will be able to drive, that the Islamist radicals will not be able to be on the same level as police that are monitoring the civilians in Saudi Arabia. So they are really trying to control the narrative, and many activists have been imprisoned because they decided to dissent. It's like, I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. Right. And we cater to it. You're right. We're catering. And then we have CNN, or was it CNN or 60 Minutes on something Mohammed bin Salman coming here, being praised and talked about, and journalists being so gentle with him, not praising him on anything about his record or Saudi Arabia.
So I just feel
Anyhow,
I just feel he's a creation of a corrupt monarchy combined with a United States that doesn't care at all about human rights. Has no and that's why people have to understand that the outrage that is coming from the Democrats and Republicans, from the establishment, is not real. Like, the most outrageous thing Saudi Arabia is doing is actually what it's doing in Yemen. And that's not the issue here.
Which is a growing famine that's happening.
Right, and really sanctions on Qatar. And that's not an issue here. That's going to continue. And in fact, even Lindsey Graham, who was basically saying, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. Because now what the U.S. is trying to do, what the establishment, I think, is trying to do, not Trump, but the establishment, is, because I think Trump is trying to figure out how to keep bin Salman in power. Now we have the world's greatest democracy, the United States, trying to figure out how they can figure out who's going to be king of Saudi Arabia. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out who's the guy we're going to install. And not so that they can clean up human rights, but so that they have a person who's much more reliable and not a crazed, kind of like a dog that gets off a leash and is running around biting everyone. So I think that is the sense I get from listening to things, is that both the Republican and Democratic establishment is outraged by this guy, thinks he's not reliable, and thinks that he's just too he does not allow the United States to maintain its moral standing by being connected to them, because the United States used to use that moral standing so it can go around and blow everyone else up, and do it under the auspices of morality. Whereas the United States really is responsible for these creations, like the Saudi Arabian monarchy, which is running rampant in the Middle East. So these people who are making this issue, and secondly, there is a way that the Democrats are trying to put Trump in a box around this, because Trump has messed this whole thing up, and they're trying to get him on in terms of it's a kind of election relationship to it. And I think just Trump is very confused. I think he's been going back and forth between I don't believe the story to this story sounds legit. Whereas you notice both the Democrats and Republican establishment has been very consistent, which is no, none of this makes any sense. We don't believe this. This guy's got to go. And that's what almost everyone is saying. And I think Trump is going to get in line. Although I do think that I don't know if this story is going to last another week, because the elections are coming. And that's going to just take up all the oxygen in the room, the elections. Will it come back after that? So I think bin Salman is just needs to hold on for another week. But the Saudi Arabian monarchy has been weakened by this. And so the king and the United States has to decide whether or not they can have this guy be there. But I think ultimately it is the United States which is going to decide this, and which I think that gives lie to this notion that we're the world's greatest democracy, because the world's greatest democracy is running around deciding who's going to be sitting on the world's most corrupt monarchy.
And I've been just pondering about how we can, because I was hearing on KPFA on Letters and Politics about what would be the possible reproach to this, because a lot of people are talking about sanctions, and it's just difficult because I'm not for these sanctions, but it is sort of like you need to call out, I don't know, it is the practical reproach for this.
It's the issue for me. The problem with sanctions is it lets the real criminal off the hook, because the real criminal here, the country that needs to be sanctioned, is the United States. You're not allowed to sell weapons to anybody else anymore. You can't, because you just sell them to crazy people in Saudi Arabia who are destroying other countries. All right, you sell them to monarchies, which will do anything to attack their own people or attack other countries. So the country that needs to be sanctioned is the country which is responsible for these sorts of brutal regimes. And so you can't have the United States calling the tune of who gets sanctioned, because they're the biggest criminals in all this. So that's why I don't buy it. And secondly, they're not going to do it. Saudi Arabia is a linchpin to their plan on keeping Iran at bay, relative to their problems with Iraq and the Middle East and the war in Iraq and war in Afghanistan, and then holding Russia off. So Saudi Arabia is too important. So they're going to try to do regime change, but yet get a guy who they think is much more reliable and much more their person. That I think the establishment of the ruling class in the United States feels like they can work with, because I think they now are like, whoa, this guy is off the hook, and he's got to go. I really don't know if he's going to go though, but because
I don't think so.
Yeah, because like you saw that the king is reorganizing the security, but who's leading that?
Bin Salman.
Bin Salman. So it's like, apparently they think
the king is like Alzheimer's, like right now sitting down. He is not doing very well mentally.
So, but it's really going to be an interesting. To me, there is a debate here that's between Trump's plan and the establishment's notion of how the world should be run and how the U.S. should run the world. I think there's something about a debate there, where Trump had been really relying on bin Salman with some questions from the mainstream ruling class in the United States, and I think now Trump's plan that was with Saudi Arabia being a key figure in that, with him, bin Salman at the top, I think that's put into a deep question now. So I think the Republicans and Democrats are basically saying he has to go. We've got to have a different sort of way, which is why I think Trump is now tilting again more aggressively towards Russia, and in the way that the establishment has wanted him to. So that's my sense of things. Although it is confusing to see how much of what the U.S. ruling class is saying is theater, and how much it is a real problem with bin Salman.
And I applaud all dissidents, all of the Saudi Arabians in the UK and in other European countries, and even here, but mostly I've been seeing these YouTube videos of Saudi Arabians that have been really criticizing the monarchy because they have the freedom of speech to be able to do it. And so they really want to get on, and they make bin Salman, he does not want anyone to criticize the monarchy or himself, because he is a representation of the monarch as well. But I applaud those dissidents, because you can say whatever you feel like saying, and you should be able to, and that is not what's happening in Saudi Arabia. And I think with bin Salman, who is trying to come off as a progressive in this light, is just such fake, so fake to come and represent a new Saudi Arabia, where it's not really like that. Even this whole driving thing with the women and thing, like, it's really the elite class that are being able to drive, because every working class, here we have to insert the working class, the working class cannot afford many of the things that that is in their wealth gap that is imposed onto them because of the system. They are still run by a capitalist system. And I honestly think about the sanctions, it's difficult because the entire world is dependent on oil. And if they had a sanction, it would really increase the prices up for gasoline, but it also would create this tension in the Middle East that I think is already a very big vacuum of lots of terrorism with lots of things that are already happening that I think would worsen the situation in the Middle East. But I'm not for it because...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm not for it because I think that there is a different way. I'm still trying to figure out. I'm not obviously a diplomat to be able to make these decisions, but I was thinking about that all day today. Like, what would be the best way to approach a sort of situation? What practical solution would it be?
It's the U.S. out of the Middle East. It's like the U.S. out of the Middle East, France out of the Middle East, Germany out of the Middle East, European Union out of the Middle East.
By the way, Germany is going to take a reproach stand against. I read today.
But again, all the biggest. See, that's my issue is to put the focus on Saudi Arabian criminality. Let's off the people who are responsible for this. Well, not just everyone else, but the people responsible. It's like when I don't know what the RICO Act stands for, but when they go after the criminal rackets, they don't go after the low level drug person. They go after the person who I mean, that's what they're supposed to be doing. That's another criminal enterprise actually itself. But what they say they're doing is they're going after the small fry, get them to talk so they can go after the person who's really the power behind the whole operation. And in this case, it's the United States. The Saudi Arabia could not do what they're doing, and it's the Western power. The whole region was carved up by Britain. You know, I mean, it's a creation of the West, and so these monarchies are propped up by democracies that know that they're monarchies and know that people don't like these things, and they have no interest in changing it because they're compliant and because they do their bidding. So the powers responsible, the powers that should be sanctioned, are the big powers, are the G8. It's not Saudi Arabia is a small fry in this. It's the big powers that are responsible for this kind of stuff, and the United States in particular in this case, that I would say is the biggest. That would be the big crook you'd want to go after and want to expose, and they're going to try to put it all not just on Saudi Arabia. They're going to try to put it on this particular guy, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And that is an inaccurate statement. He went too far with this operation, and everyone's making it like it's the biggest deal, like it's the worst thing that Saudi Arabia has ever done, when in fact it's not even, it doesn't rise to small compared to what they've done and to what the United States has done.
And yes,
the United States takes people across the country and sends them to different places in the world.
Terrorists, the biggest terrorist of the world.
Biggest terrorist into drone program, but also it grabs, it gets other people to grab them and torture them, so the U.S. doesn't have to do it. Like it does this. That's the extraordinary rendition program that came after 9/11. So the biggest criminal in all of this, the one that needs to be stopped, again, is the United States. What's important about this is what is exposed in the relationship between U.S. and another low-level criminal like the Saudi Arabian government. Well, it's not. It's a monarchy. And then again, the fiction of our democracy, because our democracy runs around supporting monarchies, and in fact trying to figure out who to put at the top of these monarchies, as opposed to how do you dismantle a monarchy? Isn't that what a democracy would be doing? You know, so.
And again, just to re-emphasize the point you had already made about Yemen, I'm deeply upset about how the USA is continuous to support and fund that war against Yemen. And the intervention that the Saudi Arabians have done into infiltrating the government of Yemen recently as well, that is all US backed.
Yes.
And that will, again, look just like the Saudi Arabians are doing, but really it's all led by the USA. It's just so, how do you like...
The Republicans, Democrats, all these people who are coming out and criticizing, not just Trump, but all like the Lindsey Grahams, Chuck Schumers, all of them are not going to say. Mark Rubio, who's been big critic of this.
Yeah, actually,
we're all supporters of the Saudi Arabian adventure in Yemen. So, and they will continue to be supporters of that. So it's the hypocrisy can't be deeper in this. I think it's just when you hear the story and with the fact, to me, there is also something about the fact that that bin Salman grabbed one of their own. Like he literally got one of the members of the ruling class and chopped him up into pieces. Like that, they can't imagine that. That's only to be done to the lower group, you know. That's to the denizens of Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib. It's not to be done to the elite. And bin Salman was crazy enough to just go after this guy, who I do think is connected to the U.S. government. And they're going to be like, no, you can't do that. And so they're going to, as I was listening to Lindsey Graham, he goes, my problem is not with Saudi Arabia. My problem is with Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And so that's going to be the target.
But who does he represent?
Right. And the question will be how will this thing end after the elections? And then it all just kind of goes away and we go back to business as usual? Or does the U.S. establishment really push to move him out of there? That is a question for me. And I can't tell if this is just political posturing so that no one gets, so no one looks like they're supporting Saudi Arabia prior to the election, or if there's a real sincere effort on part of the U.S. ruling class to get this guy out and to put somebody else there. That's what I'm not sure about.
Yeah, and I again, maybe I again, as I'm pondering this, like maybe another way to, how do you, it's like to be pardoned, or to
Oh,
like
okay, right,
to how
right,
do
right.
well
Yeah, somehow to like to recover.
to compensate for, or whatever, like this word is, maybe releasing the journalists and the dissidents and the activists. I don't know, something I've been thinking, and just because there's been so many people that they've been going after and trying to shut them out of the public, because they are trying to call out the atrocities that are happening in their own country. And in order for a country, I don't think that we need to intervene. That's not what I'm calling for, or I'm not supporting. I'm calling for, like I'm on the top of the presidency, right. Counselor. I'm not supporting that. I'm saying that the people themselves, like with the Arab Springs, how people get shut down, and activists, numerous activists are already imprisoned, because it's the form to shut people out, so they are not inciting a revolution and not inciting a change within their own country. And I don't think that's going to happen, obviously, but it would just be the ideal, in my head, thing to do to release the dissidents that exist in the Arab world.
The way he's going to recover, if he recovers, is going to be some major agreement with Turkey about a cash payment and investment by Saudi Arabia into Turkey. Like this is how this is going to be done. It's going to be paid for. There's going to be money going to Turkey. There's going to be some sort of agreement between the U.S. ruling class and the existing Saudi Arabian ruling class about favors to be done. I don't know what those are. This is not going to be decided by papering over with some sort of human rights, even looking. I don't even think the United States is looking in that direction. They just want to. I think the way he's going to recover, if he can, is big payouts to Turkey and agreements between the United States on what Saudi Arabia is going to do to make life more difficult for Iran. And but they're already in agreement on that. So I don't know if they can go any more. So I honestly don't know. What I know for a fact is that the recovery is going to be, it's like Brett Kavanaugh. It's all going to be at the top. It's going to have nothing to do with something that the working people in Saudi Arabia are going to experience, or it's going to improve the lives of people in Turkey or Yemen. No, it's going to have to do with agreements reached by people at the top that allow this guy to get off because he's doing somebody a favor and doing some country a favor, or somebody's going to get paid to make this work and to make us get over this, and that's how this is going to get settled.
Speaking of Kavanaugh, I just thought it was so stupid of Trump to have said something about how he had compared the Christine Blasey Ford thing about here we go again with guilty and proven or
Jesus Christ.
I'm just like, what is going on? Just like
I mean, and Turkey's just going like, well, here's your information, drip, drip, drip. And I do think Turkey has been. I feel like Turkey's been in a very good position.
Turkey was cooperating with the investigation.
Because they're basically saying, I believe.
But they're also revealing themselves for the
slowly.
They're bugging the consulate.
Yes, and
it's a very hard position to be in.
No, I think it's a very good position for Turkey to be in. Turkey's going to.
All embassies are going to be on board, like watching.
Everyone knows. They all know they do this to each other. They all know that this is how they watch. So, and it's very interesting that Saudi Arabia isn't showing outrage. Again, this is that Saudi Arabia and Turkey have agreed to do a joint investigation. So Turkey is basically inserting itself into this process, and Saudi Arabia and the monarchy handed Turkey a gift that Turkey didn't know what to do with, and now they figured it out, and they're gonna use it to get a hold on Saudi Arabia, and they're gonna use it to improve their relationship or get something out of the United States as well. So I think Turkey's in a very good situation. What's that? How do you pronounce the
Jamal Khashoggi?
No, the Erdogan or something.
Oh, Erdogan.
Erdogan. That guy has. This is a gift for him.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll see what happens for tomorrow then, because he's going to be talking publicly tomorrow in a big press conference.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. All right. And what else can we say about this?
I I mean, I think that's it. It just, to me, again, I think the hypocrisy is huge on the part of the United States, on every Republican and every Democrat who's wringing their hands about how awful what Saudi Arabia and this monarchy has done. They're supporting all this kind of stuff. They just can't believe this guy did this. And I just think it's really important to not let our own government distract us into making this about what do we do with Saudi Arabia. The question is, for us, particularly in this country, is what do we do about our own government that is supporting monarchies and is trying to install new people into a monarchy? What kind of, what is that? That is criminality at the highest extent, and hypocrisy at the highest extent, and we can't let our government get away with it. We will, because we're about to have elections, and people are going to be deciding between criminal Republican and a criminal Democratic party. So, you get to choose, and that's what's going to make everything. That's going to sweep everything else off the map, and then we're going to see if it comes back on after this election.
I did want to say something else, actually. That I was wondering if you feel as if this is something, because I got the impression that you feel like even though Khashoggi had been involved with the monarchy, that he has changed. I have read much of that he has changed. What do you feel about people changing over time? Because he did say he was he was pro-Islamist and pro-monarchy, and then he saw the Arab Springs, and then he realized as well that he was dismissed by the monarchy when he was editor-in-chief of this media outlet that I will have here. And he realized for himself after those events, if I invite a scholar to be somewhat critical, that wasn't really that critical, but if anyone, that shouldn't be a way for me to be dismissed from my job or be in fear of being imprisoned. And he had come, and I saw this BBC interview where he had said, I realized then that this is not what I wanted. So he had left, and he, again, self-imposed exile into the USA. And he had wrote for a column for the Washington Post. And I read the Washington Post, the recent column that he had wrote. And it sounded with a lot of the things that I agree with just speaking out against any government, speaking out against the monarchy, being able to have freedom of speech, criticizing the women that have been imprisoned because of their activism. And I think that if you evolutionize over time, even if you have some background, that it's very conservative and very right-wing, and I do think that there is a way to repair yourself, I think, in a way, if you evolutionize your way of thinking, and you can call those things out for yourself. I don't know. I don't know if maybe I got the wrong impression.
No, I don't think I know as much detail about that. I think my only first of all, I mean, it's horrible what's happened. I mean, and for his family, it's just
his cousins.
The guy got set up and murdered in sounds like a brutal, horrible way. But I do believe people can change. I think my only skepticism, I'm ignorant. I have to want to say that. But my only skepticism about it is the way that all these other people who I know I can't trust, Chuck Schumer, Lindsey Graham, are coming in and using his name. So I'm like, wait, that's probably the only area of my skepticism that suggests that he might have some level of ties to those folks of that ilk in his statements. So, but I don't know, and but it's horrible what's happened, and what Saudi Arabia did and what the U.S. essentially did in supporting regimes like Saudi Arabia to allow them to do all sorts of criminality and get off the hook all the time is. I can only say that he's one more body piled on top of this mound of bodies that the U.S. I think is responsible for. But most of those bodies right now are in Yemen, and that's where the crime is being committed. That I would hope he would speak out against. I don't know what he was saying about it, because if he's not speaking out against it, I don't know.
I think he has actually. But I don't. I'm going to link the information.
So if you can find out,
I will.
That would be a test for me about if he was critical of that war. But the fact is no one deserves. Well, he didn't deserve this. That's for damn sure. And so it's not important whether or not I believe he changed or whatever. It's not even that important.
Anyone should not, whatever your beliefs, shouldn't be assassinated for something that you disagree with.
Right. But I'm scared to see all these forces use him in such a cynical way. It makes me wonder who he was really running with.
But he was up there.
Yeah.
I mean, the media in the media in the Saudi media is not at all independent.
No.
It is controlled by the state.
Yeah.
Every single one of it, and he was a part of that.
Nor is our media independent.
Yeah, but what the difference is, Andy, is that we can have YouTube and watch and look for our independent sources if we wanted to. You cannot do that over there.
Right.
So there are
We don't
tiny.
get chopped up into tiny pieces. Thank God. If we got more viewers, we probably would get chopped up.
Oh, right.
So don't watch this.
God, Andy. Oh my God, it's so dark. All of a sudden it turned. We are approaching Halloween.
No, it is. That's what it is. It's Halloween. So.
Well, this was a very important topic, and I think that with other things, this one drowns out.
What should people
because it
be paying
national
attention to
headline.
around this, do you think? From as this moves, what would you think are going to be the important decisions that come out of this that will tell us what's really going on?
Important decision.
Like, I think it's important to watch what the U.S. does after the election. Does it keep this thing issue
yeah,
alive
should
after
do.
the election? That, to me, is going to indicate how serious they are about really trying to make some sort of... And again, making a change in Saudi Arabia is not about it's about human rights. It's about changing who the monarch is. That's all that is. And it's changing who the face of the criminal is, below the real criminals, which is the U.S. ruling class. So that, to me, is going to be a question, because he's not going to be pulled out in the next week or two. But does the U.S. continue to push this issue of who runs Saudi Arabia beyond the election? If they do, that suggests that there's real interest in the United States to get this thing settled. If they don't, then they're just looking to... Everyone's looking to cover their ass prior to the election, and then they were looking to sweep this under the rug. That's what I would say.
Well, you've answered it. And I think that's what we should all look out for, especially after the midterms.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
If I can, because we are using this platform, and I haven't done anything of my own on my own channel. But I am, over the weekend, I just wanted to quickly say this, that I'm appalled by, and I want to call out the Mexican government for what they put for militarizing the southern border, their southern border. I'm Mexican, so it's very important. I'm constantly paying attention. There's a refugee crisis in Latin America.
Next week, let's talk about the caravan.
Yeah. If so, there is Bolsonaro in Brazil, there is Venezuela, the refugees are going to Ecuador, to Colombia, to Brazil. There are all these Central Americans. There's the stuff that's happening in Nicaragua, which we have to do the interview for. Yeah. And they're coming to Mexico, and I think that they should open the borders for and let them in.
Come on in.
So, México, estoy súper decepcionado con todos ustedes. Realmente, I'm really disappointed in doing the same thing that they do to Mexicans and a lot of immigrants on this border. So, maybe we can discuss it. That's one.
I think that, to me, seems like the issue to discuss, to be honest. Although there's going to be the elections coming. I think the issue around the caravan is something to be discussed.
Yeah. There's also well, if we do discuss the elections in Florida, they're doing also prisoners will begin to vote. Maybe an update. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they do in Maine, right? There are certain states where prisoners can vote.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Maine.
We talked about that in the prison strike one.
Okay, yeah, you see.
You forgot, though.
Shh, don't say that. Edit. You will edit that now. I'm saying it now. Remember I told you in a moment? Okay, only Brandy can see that. If I forget the facts, there's so much I listen to, and I cannot.
No. But that is important.
I'm supposed to remember Maine.
If that is true,
I keep up with Latin America.
Stayed up in the corner of the United States. Who cares about that place? No, that is important if it's happening in Florida, because Florida was actually a big place of voter disenfranchisement through their prison system. It happens all over.
And we also have not discussed anything about drugs like marijuana. And Canada has recently decided to open up there.
I think the caravan issue is the one that, or maybe something around the elections, but I think it'll be something, either the caravan or something around the elections next week.
Well, there's a lot to discuss, and if you cannot see it here, I recommend some podcasts and the links below.
Yeah. So,
thank you, and please subscribe. Most importantly, rate, review, share, and subscribe. Those 4 things. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us on iTunes, where we're getting a lot of traffic. You say that we're getting traffic on Stitcher?
Yeah.
YouTube. This is a YouTube channel. You can find us on Google Play for those who have Androids, because my brother has an Android, and that's how he listens.
Okay.
And some also for some people who just want to stay off all those mainstream modes or mediums, you can always find us on BitChute as well.
Has your brother written a review yet?
Okay, this is not to be discussed
Jonathan,
here, but you
come
put
on.
him on blast. Maybe we should call out the person at every single YouTube.
Jonathan, write a review.
Jennifer, where are you?
Yeah, right.
Gemma, what happened?
All right. We're just calling everyone out.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Have a nice week. Take
Good
care.
night.
Bye-bye.